Mike and I met in Bible college doing puppets.
It really clicked right away. I mean, because we started writing, just these crazy puppet skits.
And I, for some reason, decided to do The Princess and the Pea, do a retelling of The Princess and the Pea. But I switched it around and told the story from the perspective of the pea. It never made it as a puppet show. But as we finally got into making VeggieTales, it was one of the first things we tried to sell the show with, was some little pictures that Mike and I drew of The Princess and the Pea, told entirely, at this point, with vegetables.
As we went into the first show, nobody had really done that with 3D before.
Pixar was doing some very early work at the time, doing some shorts. But this was, 8 years before Toy Story.
Well, 1993, we were technically the first American CG series.
It hadn't been done, that trail had not been walked before. So, we think we should be able to walk it, but nobody's walked it yet, so we're going to have to be the pioneers to blaze that trail.
It was a really crazy idea. There was very little money. It was this wonderful underdog situation, which I loved the whole idea behind it. Just like, well, let's just try to pull this off.
Who are you? I'm Bob. I'm a tomato, and I'm here to help you.
The title of the show, Where's God When I'm Scared, was highly appropriate at that point, because I didn't have a clue what I was doing or how I was going to sell it, how we were going to make money on it so we could make more or anything. But off we went.
We had to produce the main songs, we had to produce the main characters, we had to come up with everything from scratch.
I start writing the first VeggieTales episode, and I think, okay, I think there should be a song here. Got out my guitar and just strummed these, 3 simple chords and called my wife in, said, come here, Lisa, and she's a music major, so it was a little embarrassing.
It was the first song he ever played for me of the whole series. It was the first song I believe that was ever written. And it was so funny. We were in this little house in Chicago, and he's upstairs on the bed. And Lisa, come here. And I get up there, and he said, I think I've got this first song. And he had his guitar out, which I think was his guitar from junior high, so it's sort of 3/4 size. And I think a few of the strings were off.
Said, God is bigger than the boogeyman. He's bigger than Godzilla or the monsters on TV. Oh, and just sang that little song for her, and she just stared at me.
And just thought, oh boy, is this gonna work? Yeah, it's a cute song, but...
And we were going to a church where they had a great music director whose name was Kurt Heinecke. And I was watching him one Sunday, up on stage, and he had his synthesizers and sequencers all out and was doing all this great stuff. And I thought, I'm going to go talk to that guy and see if he could make my little song sound like a big song. And sure enough, he was interested. He wanted to help out. So we started, writing these little songs, and then Kurt would try to actually turn them into real songs.
VeggieTales, 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 VeggieTales.
When we came up for the concept of the show, it needed a name, and I came up with the name VeggieTales. I don't think there's anything that genius about it. It just made sense to me. We're telling tales with vegetables. It's VeggieTales, and it just sounds, sounds like vegetables, and so I don't know. It had a nice ring to it, and I thought, okay, yeah, that's a really good name, and then we needed a theme song, and I remember actually sitting in the office space, thinking up a theme song, and I came up with, if you like to talk to tomatoes, if a squash could make you smile. And then I got stuck on smile. And I was like, okay, what rhymes with smile? And I even borrowed Phil's rhyming dictionary. And, in that rhyming dictionary, it didn't even have aisle for it. And then, the next day it dawned on me, aisle, yes. There's a rhyme for smile. So wrote the little intro to that. Yeah, and I wanted to have Larry playing tuba, and I didn't play the tuba. So obviously Bob got to sing it because, Larry was busy playing, which Kurt actually did on an actual tuba.
The VeggieTales theme song is very clear in my head because the tuba that I played on that was probably the only live instrument we used in that first show, except for Mike Sage playing some acoustic guitar. So I used to be a band director, and so I called one of my band directing friends and asked him if I could borrow a tuba from the band, and he said sure. So he lent me the tuba, and I used to be a band director, so I can kind of fake my way through many different instruments, tuba being one of them. So I brought the tuba to our little storefront studio, and we didn't have a sound stage or a recording booth. We just had a back room with just all these tarps and sheets and blankets and acoustic tile taped up and that sort of stuff to kind of make it soundproof. And I was in there playing my tuba like at midnight one night, and Phil and Lisa were just laughing in the other room because it wasn't the best at times. But I have to say that, on the recording, when Larry plays the tuba, there were some mistakes in there that are intentional. I could have played it better, but we wanted to make it realistic, like Larry wasn't the good tuba player.
It's time for VeggieTales.
And then Lisa Vischer, I believe she did then the whole chorus, like the VeggieTales, VeggieTales. And actually, on the very first show, that's all it was. It was just the chorus. There was no broccoli, celery, gotta be VeggieTales. That didn't come in, think, until show 2. So it was just this, chorus repeated over and over again until, there's never ever been a show like VeggieTales. And I remember I actually protested about that because I thought that sounded a little presumptuous. I thought, we can't have that in there. That sounds like, we're being too snooty about it. There's never ever been a show like VeggieTales. And I remember Phil and Lisa, just looking at me and just saying, well, there hasn't. I thought, well, okay, maybe we can put that in.
So we did Where's God When I'm Scared, in 2 sections. The first section was God is Bigger Than the Boogeyman, or Tales from the Crisper, depending on what people refer to it as. And we finished that, and then I realized, oh boy, we need the other half. What's the other half going to be? And at this point, I think my wife and I had just seen Joseph, in the Technicolor Dreamcoat. So I thought, okay, I can do that. I'm going to write a musical based on a Bible story, just like Andrew Lloyd Webber. Well, I'd never done anything even remotely close to that. I woke up in the middle of the night with this little melody going through my head, bum 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 bum. Oh no, what we gonna do?
The king likes Daniel more than me.
So I got out my mini cassette recorder and I ran into the bathroom and shut the door.
In the middle of the night, I woke up because he wasn't there, which does not happen. And I am thinking, where is he? And I look and I see a light coming from under the bathroom door. And I'm thinking, is he sick? What's going on? I better go check. And I went over, and as I got closer, I see this shadow as if he's sitting next to the door, which made me worried. Perhaps he was ill. And then I hear this song. I hear him going, I am King Darius. I've had a dream.
So without further ado, silly songs with Laddie.
The Water Buffalo song.
The Water Buffalo song was the very first silly song and the only one that I wrote.
There really was no master plan, behind the idea of silly songs. From show 1, we never thought, okay, well, in every show now, there's going to be a silly song.
I just wanted to do something silly in the middle of the video, just that really weird, and now for something completely different. And I was walking through the plaza of the Dirksen Federal Building in downtown Chicago. All of a sudden, into my head, this little song just jumps. And I start singing, everybody's got a water buffalo, yours is fast and mine is slow. And I thought, well, where did that come from, first of all? And that's kind of fun. That could be, the first little goofy song that we put in as this break. Now, it was never my intention that every show would have a silly song, but rather that we just do silly things, little breaks. So the second video has The Forgive-O-Matic, which is actually a script that Mike and I performed as a puppet show back in Bible college. And so I did that. I thought, well, this is silly. We'll throw that one in. And immediately we got letters. Where's the silly song?
From that point on, we thought, okay, well, maybe this silly song concept, is something we should actually use in every show. And, so then, the Hairbrush song came after that.
And the rest was history.
And so what we have learned applies to our lives today. And God has a lot to say in His book.
I wanted to have a song that would play at the end when it was time to sum up what we had learned. Very similar to the end of any kid's show like Mr. Rogers or Captain Kangaroo, when it's, it's the time to say goodbye song.
We were driving on the way to church, and we came up with this melody, and it was just a melody. It was
do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, and we were harmonizing on it. I was like, this is great.
He said, Lisa, you have to sing this song all through church and remember it so we can run home and we can play it out on the piano or we're going to lose it.
But we had to go through a whole church service. And of course, in the church service, they're going to play songs which will knock whatever song you have in your head completely out.
And I thought, okay. And we walked into church, and the whole service, and even, the worship songs, and and I felt horrible. I had to do it. And so we raced home and sat down at the piano and plunked it out and wrote the What Have We Learned song.
Which has terrorized Bob ever since.
As I was saying,
See, we know that God's word is for everyone, and song is done, we'll take a look.
I don't remember why we decided it should be a cappella, with no instrumentation at all. And it may have been inspired by, Take Six at the time, or Bobby McFerrin.
And it came down to just Lisa and myself. I mean, Lisa sang the lead and I sang a harmony, and then we're doing the doo-doo, little background parts.
And we just kind of layered it all together and listened to it, and it sounded pretty good, but it was really missing something. And I think we sent Phil into the booth to maybe do a low bass part or something, just try to come up with anything. And he went in there, and of course, because it's in a cinder block cellar, there's no window, we can't see what's happening. And we start hearing this percussive sound that was making the whole song work. And so we open, what are you doing in there? And he's like, I'm playing my cheeks.
That kind of stuff. And that's the percussion in the song, is me playing my cheeks.
Hi, kids, and welcome to VeggieTales. I'm Bob the Tomato.
And I'm Larry the Cucumber.
And we're here to answer your questions.
Mike and my wife Lisa and I went into the post house and recorded the very first script, in probably April or May of 1993. So we started making the first video. I had one computer, it was set up in my spare bedroom, and then I was attempting to literally animate the whole film.
Phil did the math and realized that it was going to be impossible for him to finish it himself.
And I got, if you know the story of the first one, Where's God When I'm Scared, Junior watched the scary monster on TV, runs up the stairs, goes into his room, and slams the door. I'd gotten about that far, and I realized that it would be the end of me to attempt to do this by myself.
He had met a guy, his name is Chris Olson.
He was telling me this idea he had that he was working on that was animated computer vegetables that sounded very intriguing. I like crazy ideas, and it was so crazy it just might work. Came home that night and there was a message from Phil saying, hey, you want to come work for me full-time starting tomorrow? So I decided to do that. Of course, starting the next day meant that I had to build out the entire first studio because I happen to know how to drywall.
Phil did a little more math and realized that even with the two of them, they weren't going to be able to finish the animation. And so then they hired Robert Ellis.
My wife said, no, they can't work in our spare bedroom around the clock. So we rented a storefront. This is on the north side of Chicago, Foster Avenue in Damon. And it was a teeny little 600 square foot room, basically, that was in between a Spanish grocery store and a comic book shop. And we set up our one computer and we put up blinds so that people couldn't see right behind the plate glass window that there was a $70,000 animation workstation. And then the three of us triple shifted, on this one computer around the clock to try to get the show done on time. And we also, at this point, were trying to sell the videos ourselves, so we'd taken out ads in Christian magazines and had set up an 800 number in the office.
So really, as you're working, you're getting calls every hour or every half hour from people who are interested and want to learn more about it and want to talk to us, or you're typing away, you're using your mouse, you're animating the show as they're buying it, which it keeps you in touch with your audience.
In our ads, we had promised Christmas delivery. So we had to make Christmas delivery or we'd actually be guilty of mail fraud in addition to our business failing. And we finished the video, I think the last 3 weekends, we attempted to work on it all weekend without sleep.
Toward the end, we were doing this around the clock.
It got to the point where first I was staying one night, then I was staying 2 nights, then about a week later, you'd run home just to take a shower to hop back into work.
We would crawl off into the corner, sleep for a couple hours, and get up and do it again.
Then finally, the final rush, we got everything to tape that we could. They took the edit system. We still had to finish editing it, so we brought all the rendered frames in the actual computer itself to a new edit company, and we're laying everything off. We hadn't slept now for 5 or 6 days.
We finally got everything laid off to a master tape, and we rushed it off to the duplicator and then slept for 2 days while he duplicated.
2 days later, we got the copies back. We all got together in the office and stuffed them into envelopes and put the mailing addresses on them and then loaded them up into the back of Robert Ellis's station wagon and drove down to the Central Post Office in Chicago and got them all out. And about half the people got theirs 2 days before Christmas and the other half got theirs the day after Christmas. But the first video went out.
We succeeded. We nearly killed ourselves, but we actually got it done.
We sold 500 copies of the first video, which did not even pay for the ads we'd taken out in magazines, much less the production of the video. But some of the Christian publishers and Christian music companies were among the first people to order the video on our 800 number with their credit cards. So right after Christmas, when the first videos came out, Word Music flew Lisa and I down to Nashville, put us up in a hotel, took us out to dinner, and we'd been starving, or we were starving actually right about then. So by the time it was done 5 months later, we had a 12 video deal with Word, which brought in some money so we could actually pay people and buy another computer and really get going and see where it would go. The team that we put together, which kind of evolved, friends, wives, people at church that we just kind of picked at random. It was just an amazingly tight little group of 5 or 6 people that were turning out half-an-hour films, every 4 to 5 months that were unlike anything anybody else had ever seen before. Bob is basically a good guy. He wants to make the world a better place. He gets a little bit too caught up in his own plans, gets a little too stressed out when things go wrong, a little too much of a control freak. So he's if you mixed Mr. Rogers with Henry Ford or Howard Hughes, you'd have kind of an eccentric, driven type A Mr. Rogers, and you could have some trouble. And that's where Bob is.
In show number 1, and I think maybe even into show number 2, Larry had a different voice. And when I started doing Larry, I actually borrowed his voice from a character that I had done in puppetry. The character's name was Soupy. And his voice was really kind of low and with a lisp and that kind of thing. And so I did that for show number 1. And for show number 2, I think I continued it a little bit, but I didn't like. I remember watching the show and I just didn't like it. And so Larry's voice then started to change very gradually. And so
then it started to go up, but he still kind of had a lisp
to it. So there's like a group of shows, probably from show number 3 up until, I don't know, show number 14 or so, where Larry still, had a lisp, and then he went through a little speech therapy and got rid of his lisp too.
And I'm Larry the Cucumber.
Larry, at the heart of it, is just a kind of a carefree little cucumber, and he's goofy, but he's not too goofy. I think if Larry were pure goofy, he'd be annoying to watch. But I think he's got a lot of sincerity in him, a lot of he's in the know about a lot of stuff, and so he doesn't react to stuff completely naively. There's always a little bit of of knowingness there, which I think makes him more real. He's an extension of my own personality, sort of. If I took a caricature of myself, that would probably be Larry.
Oh, it's all so clear now. Hurry up and tell the story. My head's starting to sweat.
Okay, here goes.
Junior, I think he's one of the healthier examples of how to live on planet Earth, because he's extremely vulnerable, and he's soft-hearted, and he doesn't have any pretense. He hasn't grown up enough and encountered this cruel, harsh world enough to develop the pretense, and so he's soft-hearted and tender and vulnerable, and so all of he's comfortable with whatever emotions are there, but his faith is limited, and he's okay with it. He's okay that he doesn't grasp everything.
God is bigger than any of them, and even though he doesn't squirt slime out of his ears, he made the whole universe, and he's taking good care of me, too.
Well, you're right.
To have characters and songs be able to help us find that unpretentious, faith-filled, dependent longing, just basically, I just need you to love me. I think that's just really important, and probably why people are drawn to his character.
We were friends with a group of people at a church that we were attending, Park Community Church in Lincoln Park in Chicago.
Just a very creative church. It was a community church in downtown Chicago with a real artistic focus to it.
Phil and Lisa were both involved in the arts ministries at Park Community Church, and they were able to interact with a lot of talented people, and they were able to tap into those people.
And I think when you look at that first show and look at the credits, I think except for Robert and Chris, who he brought on as animators, I think everybody else is from the church.
Dan Anderson wrote sketches with me, and he was one of my better friends, and he became the voice of Dad Asparagus. And it was just perfect for him, because in many of our sketches, I think he played the father figure.
Dan had the perfect, sort of leave it to Beaver dad voice, and so he could just kind of come and do his regular voice, and just sell himself as, I'm Junior's dad.
Sounds like you've been doing some good thinking. But it's time to shut the thinker down now and get some sleep.
A commercial was done by one of the big LA shops that had 2 salt shakers or a salt and pepper shaker on a kitchen countertop. And they actually squished. They were squishy. Everything before that in computer animation had been rigid, plastic. And these 2 actually jumped around like little Warner Brothers characters. And it was great. And I just, how did they do that? And it was a brand new technique called lattice deformation, where you could take any object, like a salt shaker or a toaster oven, and put it in a lattice or a box. And then rather than moving every point in the object, you only had to move the points on the box. And they would twist the object inside it. So you could take a very complex object and make it squishy. And I thought, okay, that's how I'm going to tell my stories. But I knew then that I needed characters that would be so simple that you could animate them by putting them inside a little box and then animating the little box. So that they couldn't have arms, they couldn't have legs, and because of the complexity, they couldn't have hair and they couldn't have clothes. So I bought, this is in 1991, bought my own computer animation system. I had quit my job and set up my own little company. And actually, to buy that first computer animation system, my parents took out a second mortgage on their house so that I could get that first system and get going. And started playing around with, okay, what am I going to put in the box to make it squishy? And I made a little man that looked like he was made out of Nerf, a little Nerf ball guy, and got him kind of moving. And that was kind of cute. And then I started playing around with a candy bar. And I made a little chocolate candy bar. Put kind of big goofy eyes on them, and the eyes, each eye was also in a little box. The eyes were really squishy, and that gave him his expressiveness, and then had this little candy bar bending around on the countertop. And I had just gotten married, and my wife walked by our spare bedroom and saw the image on the screen and said, moms are going to be mad if you make their kids fall in love with candy bars. And I thought, good point. Okay, what wouldn't moms be mad about their kids falling in love with? And the very next thing that popped into my head was a cucumber. So I took the eyes off the candy bar, made a little cucumber, made him green, put the eyes on the cucumber, and then looked at him and thought, okay, he's kind of goofy, I think, so I'm going to give him one tooth and a big grin. And then just his expression, just like, oh, okay, I think I know how he would act. So I did a 12-second piece of animation that was on a tile kitchen countertop that actually looked a lot like that old TV commercial I'd seen with the salt and pepper shaker. And we pan down the countertop, and you see a bowl, a ceramic bowl, and all of a sudden this little cucumber sticks his head up over the edge of the bowl, hops up to the camera, and grins. Just pops this big, goofy, one-tooth grin. And when I played it for the first time, this little 10-second clip, I thought, he's alive. There's my character. Kids can relate to this guy. And also, I know what he'll do in different situations. If he gets stranded on a desert island, I know how he'll act. If he gets stuck in a runaway train, I know how he'll act. I can see his personality just through his face. But he was alone, and it was not good. And he was tall and skinny. So I thought, okay, he needs a sidekick who's short and round. And it's an Abbott and Costello or Laurel and Hardy thing. So I made a tomato. I thought, okay, cucumber and tomato, that's really cute. But I didn't want them, then I was thinking about what are we going to name them? What do you name these guys? Is it Cookie the cucumber and Tommy the tomato? I thought, no, that's way too cute. I don't want to do anything that cute. So I wanted really, really kind of regular names. And actually made a list on paper of what are all the really regular names we could come up with for these two guys, and settled on Bob the tomato and Larry the cucumber. The first thing I did was a 10-second clip of Larry, just to see if he would come to life and if he could engage and tell a story. And that worked great. I was hoping that would, help us fund the whole thing, but it didn't. So then I realized that we needed to do something longer. So Mike and I sat down and said, okay, we need to do like a 2-minute film to really show that we can do this. So that was, the inspiration for the first short that really launched VeggieTales.
All right. VeggieTales promo, take 38.
Okay, get this. All the citizens of the kitchen come together. Fruits, vegetables, small kitchen appliances. Regardless of species, color, or brand name, they all come together with one purpose. And that purpose...
Hey, Bob! Have you seen my plastic wind-up lobster?
Not now. That purpose is to create the most fantastic Christian children's series anyone has ever imagined. A show bursting with positive values, filled with lighthearted stories, songs, and educational materials. A show so bold, so innovative, so earth-shattering it could only be called one thing: VeggieTales!
Oh, here it is. Oh.
Just a minute, not so fast. Before this nonsense goes any further, I just want everyone to know that I was against it from the start. Isn't that right, dear?
That's right, he was.
Yes. When that pickle came up to me,
It's a cucumber, dear.
Oh, yes, whatever. As I was saying, that cucumber came up to me and asked me what I thought we should do this weekend. I suggested a Caesar salad might be nice. We hadn't done one of those in a while. But no, they decided to do a television show instead. I mean, really. You put vegetables in salads. You use them as side dishes. Occasionally, you might use them as an aesthetically pleasing garnish. But you never, never put vegetables on television. It is simply not done.
Oh, I don't know. I kind of like the idea.
Well, the purpose of Take 38 was to raise funds. We wanted to say, to create this video, which was about 3 minutes long, and take it around to people and say, hey, isn't this cool? We're thinking of doing a video series based off of these characters. And really, that's what Bob was doing. He was pitching the whole video series. I want to create, this show of VeggieTales that's gonna change the world.
And I was trying to write something, and it wasn't going very well, wasn't going anywhere. And then I remember, and we were actually trying to record off a little script that was not very good. It wasn't working. And we were both frustrated, and Mike walked over to the other end of the room, as I remember it, and sat down to think for a while, and came back and said, Larry is looking for his blue plastic wind-up lobster. And I have no idea where that came from, but I thought, that's it. That's how it starts.
So we rewrote it with Bob, being the very serious one that was going to change the world with VeggieTales, and Larry kind of off in his own world, behind Bob, looking for his plastic wind-up lobster. And just the contrast between those two, Bob, just this noble, tomato that wants to save the world, and Larry, kind of off, bouncing around, kind of goofy Larry. I think really helped cement the personality of the characters. And then from there, it made it really easy then as we headed off into, the rest of the scripts, sort of to say, okay, these are our characters, and they're loosely defined, they're loosely based on our own personalities, kind of both pushed to the extreme.
Then I wanted to go further than that, though, and so we created Archibald Asparagus, and actually Junior's mother was created, but as kind of a wife or a female friend of Archibald. And then Archibald, and this was probably the first real Monty Python moment, Archibald came out, very dry and British, and said, you do not put vegetables on television. You put vegetables in salads. You may use them for a garnish, but you never, ever put vegetables on television. It is not done. And that kind of set up, this is kind of bizarre. We're going to make fun of ourselves for what we are doing here. So when it was all done, it was about 2 minutes long. And of course, I wanted to show that we could do music. So Mike and I, in the background, while Bob was giving his speech, hummed the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And then I thought, okay, now they know we can do music too. So surely they'll fund our little movie. It didn't work. Christmas 1993, we finished Where's God When I'm Scared? It was me, Chris Olsen, Robert Ellis, and Mike. And killed ourselves, collapsed into bed, slept for a couple of days, and got up, and all of a sudden I realized, what are we going to make next? We need something else. I was paying these guys, and we didn't have anything to do next. So I had written a puppet skit back in Bible college where I met Mike, called The Forgive-O-Matic. And I thought, okay, let's, I've got this puppet skit, I'll just throw that into production. Say, here, make this. Gave that to Chris and Robert to make while I figure out, a longer story. And so we started making that, which ended up replacing the silly song. The very first episode had the Water Buffalo song. The second episode had the Forgive-O-Matic, which I thought, this is cool, we'll do something different, every time here, which turned out not to be what our fans wanted. But it gave them something to do. And then I sat down to write the next thing, and way back in the very beginning, before Where's God When I'm Scared, one of the ideas that we threw around was spoofing classic literature. And we'd come up with a list of like, Bridge Over Pumpkin Pie and, War and Peaches. And one of them was The Grapes of Wrath.
Phil and I went out to a restaurant, Thai restaurant, and actually, talked about what would the second segment be, and came up with this idea for Larry's Lagoon, sort of a Gilligan's Island spoof.
Gilligan's Island isn't necessarily considered classic literature. I guess that's where we realized that we were both bigger fans of pop culture than we were of classic literature. And I guess that was probably kind of a turning point for VeggieTales. Because we started out, all right, what's next? Grapes of Wrath. And then next is Gilligan's Island, and we never, although we made it back to classic literature with Madame Blueberry, which is based on Madame Bovary, and Hamlet.
Great! Well, just guess where you think my ships are.
Oh, okay. 2B.
Not 2B.
Drat.
And then Mike and I had a discussion because we decided that Larry was going to crash the boat because he was daydreaming, because he's a dreamer, he doesn't pay attention. And we were talking about, well, what's his daydream? What is Larry's daydream that gets him into trouble? And Mike's idea was that Larry daydreams that his nose floats off of his head and floats around him. And it distracts him.
Yeah, see, I thought that was much more creative and original than, smashing icebergs. I don't know how that would have worked actually now in retrospect. It's probably better that he was an ice-breaking captain.
We made God Wants Me to Forgive Them in 1994, so we're still, a year before Toy Story. And we set out, to okay, we're going to build a little desert island with palm trees and stuff, and that was much more elaborate than anything we tried to do before. And we now had, we had a nicer space to record audio in because there was a little vault in this office that we had rented, so we'd go back in the vault. But we were right by the train line, and so if you listen to any of those early tapes, we'll be in the middle of a take, and then somebody will say, "Train," and then everyone just stops talking. Tape kept rolling, and then, okay, we're clear, and then we, hi kids, we're back into it again. About this time, people in Chicago started hearing, there are these guys up on the north side making videos, and so they started sending us voice tapes. And one of them was a guy named Jeff Morrow, who turns out was the voice of Diggum from the old Sugar Smacks commercials.
I'm so happy to see you forgiving each other.
Which is pretty cool, and had done, Folgers in your cup, and just had this huge voice. It's like, oh, I love this voice. And so we cast him as Palmy, the palm tree, with the little coconuts that sing backup, which are both my wife. My wife is both the coconuts. And Jeff was the palm tree. And it was just so cool, because Mike and I could never, ever do a voice that big and rich.
I remember when Jeff Morrow came in to record as the voice of Palmy.
It makes me want to sing. Do you mind?
And in one take, it's done. I'm like, now I see why there's professional voiceover talent, because they're really good at what they do.
You know that in love we can forgive. It is the only way to live.
God Wants Me to Forgive Them, show 2, that was so long ago. I didn't even have a computer then. We were just using a sequencer off one of my keyboards. So to do any sort of scoring, I couldn't lock to picture. We literally were using a stopwatch. So that's a very embarrassing period for me back then, because I listened to some of the music, more the score, if you can even call it that. I mean, we'd had very small segments of, okay, here's a little bit of tension, let's do something with that. And, just very rudimentary beginnings of scoring at that point. I had been arranging for years and writing on the side and working at a church, taking songs every week and arranging them. So it seemed pretty natural for me for Phil to come forward, or for Lisa or Mike at times, and say, okay, here's the start of a song, what can you do with it? And I'm kind of hearing Dixieland, or hearing polka, or hearing classical. And it's like, oh, okay, kind of grab from my ideas of what that means and what instruments that means, and just start going from there and seeing what comes out. Grapes of Wrath had that fun car in it, which that was a fun experience because we actually used my sampler and created all the car sounds, which way back then, that was about 10 years now. That was, it was a stretch for us because we hadn't done much of that yet. So I sampled a lot of different sounds from our sound library, wrenches and ratchets and squeaks and engine noises, and then we actually, I think I did something like just something with my mouth that then we ran through some effects and maybe for the car sound, and layered 10 sounds on there and created this little chugging car sounds.
We must have hit a bump!
A story, if it's really effective, a film, a book, whatever, if it's really effective, it has a theme. It's not just about, like, The Lord of the Rings isn't about hobbits and orcs. It's about valor and self-sacrifice. Those are the themes. The plot is hobbits and orcs. And for a story to be really effective, it raises a central question and then answers it. And that's really the basic format of VeggieTales. It's the format of all good storytelling, is a story that can raise a central question, and we do it very literally.
Now, Marco had a question for us. He said that when his baby sister does something that makes him mad, and then she says she's sorry, well, Marco's mom says he needs to forgive her. Why does he have to forgive?
Oh, that's a good question.
Now, the purpose of the story is to demonstrate the answer to that central question, not to just say it, like you would in a classroom, but to show it in a life, in a story. Here's the answers in this story. But because we're dealing, often with 3- and 4-year-olds, then we'll come out at the end and say, if you missed it, if you didn't pick it up from the story, here's what we learned. Sing the What Have We Learned song. Here's the answer to the central question. And the answer is the nugget of truth. It's a summation of a theme that's so simple that even a 4-year-old can pick it up, put it in his pocket, and carry it around for the rest of his life. And that was key from the very beginning, that kids need to walk away from these stories with a lesson that they can use.
That's one smart grape.
We started getting fan mail really as soon as people got the first show, Where's God When I'm Scared, which was really, really cool. And some of the first letters, just blew us away because they loved it. They just loved it, and their kids loved it, and they couldn't wait for the next one. And it was really the coolest thing, because we're starving trying to make the next one. And we have no idea if the first one is any good, and all of a sudden we get this, really great feedback that my kids were afraid of the dark. They're having trouble sleeping, and they watched this video like 2 times, and now they're not. And to see immediately, you work so hard, and then to see the impact right out of the gate, that you can have with the story, that has biblical truth in it. Wow, all right, onward! That was a lot of fun. Whenever I would read my kids' Dr. Seuss books, or a Winnie the Pooh thing, say, I bet I could do that, but I'd never gotten around to really trying. So we picked the parable of the Good Samaritan, which is actually one of the only New Testament things we've ever done. Because the New Testament, we made the rule on day one that we won't portray Jesus as a vegetable, so that wipes out the Gospels, and then everything else is pretty much a letter, and so that wipes out those, because animating letters is not very much fun. But the parables are really interesting. So we took the parable of the Good Samaritan, and I wanted to just, as if Dr. Seuss, came back to life and decided to write the Good Samaritan.
Oh my,
said the doctor.
He's wearing a pot. The little one there is from Gibber-de-Lot. You saved this fellow? You pulled him through it? I don't understand. Tell me, why did you do it?
Actually, it came pretty easily, and it was really, really fun. And it took a long time. It's laborious, because you have to figure out how many stanzas does this whole thing have to be the right length. And then, so, here's the storyline. So how many stanzas to get from point A to point B, and then how many stanzas to get from point B to point C, which is very different than just writing a normal script. And then you get into each particular stanza. Okay, what do I have to say in this stanza, to get to the next stanza, and then I have to make it rhyme. And sometimes, if you're not careful, your quest for a rhyme will actually change the course of the plot. And sometimes you'll just, you'll go way out of your way to make a rhyme you want, like lobster. I want to use the lobster, so mobster is the only thing I can think of right now that rhymes with lobster, so I guess I need mobsters.
One Floridian fellow who hated to fight tried hard not to act like a mobster. While pots crashed around him from morning till night, he'd just play with his pet wind-up lobster.
I hadn't hired any designers, so I designed Flibberoloo, the hills, did little pencil sketches, And then Chris Olsen, was charged with building it, but he also, because I would only do pencil sketches, he had to pick the colors for everything, all the way through with The Toy That Saved Christmas. And that's right about the time we brought in Joe Sapulich, who actually drew with colors. And that changed everything. I did the basic sketches on here's what the hills look like, here's what the towns look like, and these guys have pots on their head and these guys have shoes on their head. The shoes on their head was inspired by Terry Gilliam's Brazil. Some of the aristocratic women in that film actually wear very elaborate hats with giant upside-down shoes in them, and it's never mentioned. They never point it out. It's just one of the details. And I love that kind of bizarre, why is that? Not even going to try to explain it.
I think my biggest memory about Neighbor is the Hairbrush song. We needed to come up with a new silly song. Our fans were asking us for a silly song. We did one in show 1 and left it out of show 2 and started getting letters.
Where's the silly song? And my first thought was, I never promised you a silly song in every video. Who said we were going to do that? But we thought about it, thought, okay, yeah, that was pretty funny, so let's do another silly song.
I loved writing sort of farcical music. To me, growing up, that was something that was more enjoyable to me than regular music. I got more of a charge and a kick out of listening to, Weird Al Yankovic and listening to the Dr. Demento Hour than I did, listening to Top 40. I just like that sort of thing.
And I said, Mike, see if you can come up with something. We need another silly song.
And I said, sure, I can, probably do that.
And so he came back with the Hairbrush song, which is, for many people, the classic signature silly song.
Oh, where is my hairbrush? Oh, where is my hairbrush? Oh, where, 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 oh, where is my hairbrush?
Mike's original idea was, oh, where is my razor?
I was actually in the shower one day, and I usually shave in the shower, and the razor that I used wasn't there, and so I was looking around for it, and I just started singing, oh, where is my razor? Oh, where is my razor? Oh, where is my razor? And it just sort of clicked. It's like, oh, well, that's kind of fun. So I just sort of built this whole song about, Larry looking for his razor so he can shave, and then went to Phil and said, hey, here it is.
And I said, Mike, I don't think we want kids running around the house looking for razor blades. And he said, oh, they wouldn't do that. Their parents wouldn't let them do that. I said, well, let's find something softer. And sponge, that's only one syllable, so that didn't work. So we end up with hairbrush.
No hair for my hairbrush. No hair for my hairbrush. No hair, no hair, nowhere, no hair, no hair, no hair, nowhere back there, no hair for my hairbrush.
It wasn't supposed to be entirely sung at first. Only the choruses were supposed to be sung and the verses were supposed to be spoken until my wife went into the booth and sang her part.
Why do you need a hairbrush? You don't have any hair!
Originally, the singing parts were spoken parts until Lisa Vischer sung the line that she was supposed to speak, and it just sounded great, so all the spoken parts were reworked into singing parts, and it just made the whole thing more like a, mini opera.
My little hairbrush. I remember that day, that fateful trip. It started from that tropic port aboard our tiny ship.
And then after we had spoofed Gilligan's Island, I immediately turned to what's the next, big, epic childhood rerun memory that I have, which was Star Trek. Parroting something as broad and big and obvious as Star Trek it's almost too easy.
There it is, the USS Apple Pies.
And that, of course, created Scooter, the carrot, to play the role of Scotty.
Oh, Captain, you've returned.
It was fun to jump in way back at the beginning because this was show 3 with the spoofs. Boy, back then we hadn't really scored anything at all. Phil, as a director, wasn't used to that. I, as a writer, hadn't scored much yet. So it was a little bit of a stretch to start bringing in those elements of creating a mood, especially in Flibberoloo, as we're in a different location that's apart from the veggie, tabletop and those sorts of elements.
I'm I'm Jimmy Gord. I'm Jerry Gord. We're the new guys.
There are many different inspirations for voices. In this case, we both worked for a fellow previously who had a very kind of a uptight way of talking. And so we would both just, kind of mimic him. And so we decided for these two characters to both do our versions of mimicking this guy.
Sometimes I think I could eat a whole bus. Yeah, well, sometimes I think I could eat a whole spaceship.
The voices themselves sort of grew over time, but when they first appeared, they were very sort of limited and choppy.
And then over time, as we did them more, Jimmy just got broader, and Jerry kind of got more nasal and more, limited to this little space. And Jimmy got a little more flamboyant and a little more up and down. Like that, he's a little more cartoonish. But they started out as our attempts to parody the same guy, our former boss, who will remain nameless.
The Muffin Man, do you know the Muffin Man? He lives on...
It's really funny how those guys came about. Phil and I had done, Bob and Larry as a pair before, and now along comes Jimmy and Jerry, and later we'd see Jean-Claude and Philippe. So it was always kind of fun to do those, brother or paired voices with Phil, because we could just get in the booth and play off each other, which worked really well.
Mais oui, Jean-Claude, mais oui.
It was really delightful. I just loved it. Loved writing it, loved seeing it come to life, the way that verse, will bring a rhythm to a film, is really, really fun. And it was time consuming, so I didn't try it again, for quite a while until we got to A Snoodle's Tale. It was, like 5 years later, 6 years later, but it was a lot of fun.
The bunny, whoa, I love the bunny.
Rack, Shack, and Benny is about the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and the fiery furnace, which key point in that story is the boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, say that 10 times fast, were asked to, basically everyone who was at the palace in Babylon, whenever you hear this music play, you have to bow down to this 90-foot statue of me. That's what the king said. You have to worship me. Bow to the statue when you hear the music play. And so I was going through that story, trying to write, kind of not a literal retelling, but a kind of a weird retelling, kind of a Monty Python, or Terry Gilliam retelling of it. And I thought, okay, Mr. Nezzer with the chocolate factory, he's making chocolate bunnies. So he was going to build a 90-foot bunny. I thought, oh, that's pretty funny. You have to bow to a 90-foot bunny. So I thought, okay, we need a song that they're supposed to sing and then bow down to the 90-foot chocolate bunny. So it's the bunny song, right? I mean, what else could it be? It's not the carrot song. It's the bunny song.
The bunny song is how all my employees will show just how much they love the bunny.
So I was playing around on my guitar, just with this really simple little melody, and it came up with the basics of the song. I thought, cool, I got a cool little melody, this is going to be really fun, but the song has to be bad enough that kids will say, ooh, oh, they shouldn't sing that song, that's a bad song. So I wrote the bunny song. And the original version included lines like, I don't love my mom and I don't love my dad. I won't go to church and I won't go to school. That stuff is for sissies. Bunnies are cool.
I won't go to church and I won't go to school. That stuff is for sissies, but bunnies are cool.
I don't want no pickles, I don't want no honey, I just want a plate and a fork and a bunny.
We've got those backup singers at the end also, of course. Again, just pulled in a couple friends. In fact, one of them was Lisa Vischer, Phil's wife. She's got a beautiful voice. A lot of people don't realize that when you hear her as Junior Asparagus, how nice of a voice she's got.
I don't want to tell you a joke that is funny, I just want a plate and a fork and a bunny.
Within about 2 weeks of the film coming out, we started getting letters, and they would go something like, so I was in a supermarket the other day, and you can imagine my embarrassment when my 4-year-old was singing at the top of his lungs, I don't love my mom and I don't love my dad. And I'm like, ooh, no, wait a minute. Doesn't the 4-year-old know that that's the song we're not supposed to sing? That's the bad song. And then someone else wrote in and said, I heard my kids out in the yard singing with their friends, I won't go to church and I won't go to school. I thought, oh man, this is backfiring. It's the song they're not supposed to sing and it's so catchy they're all singing it.
You get a real simple tune. I mean, it's just You know, it's just 4 chords, just over and over in different styles. I mean, it was fun to take the simplicity of that and then build, you know, the background singers, the drum parts, everything else, so that we get some different levels of emotion in it. But then to take that melody and put it over the top of it, that's why it sticks in your head.
We were going to put out a sing-along tape with the songs from that video because it has some fun songs on it. So the first task was, okay, we can't put this song on the sing-along tape because it's the song you're not supposed to sing. So we recorded another version of it, which we called the Redeemed Bunny Song, which is the one you're supposed to sing. Like, okay, kids, this is the one you're supposed to sing. And we thought that maybe that would take care of it. And so the kids would sing this one, not that one. But it didn't take care of it, and we still got letters.
Yeah, I'll go to church, and I'll go to school. That stuff is important, and I ain't no fool.
So then we decided we had to go back yet again and record an improved version of the Bunny Song, which is still bad, because the tricky thing is it had to be bad so that there could be the good coming at the end when they don't sing it. So we kind of watered down the bad and made it less overtly bad. And that one, the letters stopped. Once that one started going out, the letters pretty much stopped. So that seems to have done the trick. But now it's kind of funny because we actually got a few letters when that one came out of people saying, hey, I love the original version. Why'd you change it for? You can't please all the people all the time. But we try.
It was neat to see a company that's willing to make a change because they've got concerned parents and concerned fans out there. That was the special part for me about going back in and putting in the extra work to get something done like that.
I won't eat no beans, and I won't eat tofu. That stuff is for sissies, but bunnies are cool.
I don't want no pickles, I don't want no...
Villains tend to sing negative messages because they don't know any better. That's why they're villains. If they sang good songs, they wouldn't be villains. So what we learned when we sang the What Have We Learned song is that it's okay to have a negative message in a film as long as you don't put it in a really catchy song. Only positive messages can go in catchy songs.
Bunny, the bunny, yeah, I love the bunny.
Dave and the Giant Pickle was the 5th video. We started out with Where's God When I'm Scared, which was, there were just 3 of us killing ourselves. Then we did God Wants Me to Forgive Them, and there were still, I think there were 4 of us when we did that one, and we killed ourselves trying to make it, a little bit better. And then we did Are You My Neighbor, and then we did Rack, Shack, and Benny. And on Rack, Shack, and Benny, I think we were up to 6 people, and it was way too ambitious. It was huge with factories, chase scenes, the whole thing. Rack, Shack, and Benny, really almost killed us. So as that was winding down and it was time to write the next one, my only thought was, let's make it simple and silly.
We did it in about 4 months, which I think it still holds the record for the most quickly completed show. Even though it's simple, the story still holds up.
I was reading the story of David and Goliath, and it starts, when you get actually to the battle, it starts out, it says, the 2 armies, the Philistines and the Israelites, were camped out on opposing hills, and in the morning, the armies would line up facing each other and would yell at each other. They would yell, and that's how they started battles back then. They would yell, insults back and forth at each other. And the first thing that popped into my head was the Frenchman from Monty Python and the Holy Grail on the wall yelling. And I thought, okay, that's, those are my Philistines. They're going to be, Monty Python Frenchmen. Why peas? I think it was just because I knew we could afford to do a lot of simple spheres. That would be relatively easy if we had to make a lot of them. Everything else is too complicated.
Chris Olsen and I did the voices for the 2 upfront P's, Jean-Claude and I don't know if we named him Christophe P or something like that. And then later Phil came in and started doing Philippe P, and then Jean-Claude and Philippe sort of, were the P pair. But yeah, Chris, I guess, had studied French or something like that, and I knew no French. But I have the gravelly French accent, so I did Philippe P. No, I did Jean-Claude P, not Philippe.
Dave and the Giant Pickle was also the introduction of Larry's alter ego, Larry Boy.
I am that hero!
And I had an idea kicking around in my head for a Batman spoof where Bob would actually be Bat Bob and Larry would be Larry Boy.
When we introduced Larry Boy for the first time, Larry is not feeling special at the beginning, and so he thinks that he has to dress up like a superhero to feel special. And then Dave and the Giant Pickle is about, God being able to use you no matter how little you are, or no matter, what you think your own abilities are. And then later Larry learns that, he's special just the way he is, but he can still dress up like Larry Boy if he wants to. Larry Boy's voice is a little bit different. I mean, it's not that easy to tell, but
Larry the Cucumber is, just kind of a little bit higher and, a little windier, I guess.
And then Larry Boy gets a little gruffer.
I'm Larry Boy. Say there, citizen.
So it just a little bit more gravel in the Larry voice. And actually, the Larry Boy voice, I can do Larry all day, but I need like 5 gallons of water in the booth if I'm going to do Larry Boy, because it's really gravelly.
David was a shepherd, and so we thought, okay, what vegetable should we use for sheep? No, wait a minute. That doesn't seem right. So then, can we use sheep for sheep? And if so, can they be scaled as if the vegetables were people to the sheep? Otherwise the vegetables would be this big and the sheep would be huge. And so that was the first time we really started stretching the metaphor, from going into this all-vegetable world to going into an all-vegetable world and finding an animal that's scaled, appropriately to the vegetables. And then we've, taken all sorts of liberties with that since. But it was a major milestone in veggie history to say we can introduce animals into this world and scale them down. And it changed everything.
I love my lips.
I Love My Lips, the silly song, has proven to be a favorite. When it started out, Mike came in and said, okay, I got the new silly song. It's I Love My Tongue.
And it was actually, at the time, kind of a yodeling thing, and I wanted to give Larry a reason to yodel, and so it started off as I Love My Tongue, because,
Yodelly, yodelly.
There's just a lot of, that flying around when you're yodeling. And so, it started to turn into a song called I Love My Tongue, which just sounded kind of weird. And so Phil and I talked about it, and then I kind of started to rearrange it into I Love My Lips and made it more of a scat thing, for Larry to do scat, which was also kind of fun. And I saved the yodeling idea for a few years later when I did the yodeling veterinarian of the Alps, so the idea wasn't lost.
Well, what did you think of the story?
Oh my goodness, that was amazing. Dave was just a teeny little guy, but he beat Goliath, who was the biggest, strongest guy they'd ever seen.
It's one of my favorite videos, and I don't know if it's because I like the video as much or because it was a good memory making it, because it was on schedule, it was on budget, no one died, we had fun making it. It took 4 months, about 6 people for 4 months, and we turned it out. Like, well, that was easy.
Despite the fact that it was simple, it's still some people's favorites, because it's just a really cute little story with a great little lesson. We've always kind of, pushed the technological edge.
When we created the toy that saved Christmas, there were some dramatic changes in production values.
Toy was a pretty big step for us.
The big difference between Toy and the ones before this is we tried for a grander scope.
The Toy That Saved Christmas was significantly more ambitious than the films we had done before it.
I was the second person that Phil hired.
Back then we had, there was only like 8 of us. I was the 9th employee.
And there were still only 10 of us, the same number that we had just done. I think Dave and the Giant Pickle was before that, right?
Right.
Which is a
much
simpler show. So we kind of killed ourselves to get it done on time.
I remember heat and no sleep.
It was a screw factory.
And smelled the cutting oil that was in the air.
A one-story brick, completely sealed. You can only get in through the doors. Screw factory.
The guy who had built the factory had actually spent way too much on his front offices for the scale to the factory itself. So he went out of business. He went bankrupt.
I think it was the shag carpeting and the...
Yes, I mean, he built himself his own, big wood-paneled office, very 60s, with lime green linoleum tile all over the place. And then his office had shag carpeting, real wood paneling, his own bathroom, personal bathroom. And so he went out of business because he spent too much.
Don't forget about the drapes.
On his office. Oh,
the drapes.
Drapes to die for.
Yep,
It was all very kind of, Austin Powers.
And we actually packed FedEx packages, in the office, sent them to people. People would open them up and say, "That smells like your office." It's like,
so we were shipping this.
Ship the smell.
Yes, shipping the smell across the country. Jim and Jerry.
Ich bin ein Gord.
The landlords wanted to change the air conditioning unit on the roof of the aforementioned screw manufacturing plant. And this is in September, summer was ending, so they walk in the door in September, go to the woman who was working our front desk at that time and say, "Would now be a good time to shut down the air handling for the year?" And she looked around.
And it was a cool day on that particular day.
And it was a cool day. And said, "I think so." And then they turned around and walked out. We never heard of this conversation. It was never relayed to us. 2 days later, the air conditioning turns off. Then we get a heat wave. So we've got a heat wave in September heading into October. We've got 10 people working on computers trying to finish a show.
It's 110 outside.
And, it's 85, 88 degrees, in the office.
I went out and I bought a bathing suit. And I was sitting there working in the bathing suit.
But that's where green linoleum comes in handy, because it stays quite cool, so you can actually cool off on the linoleum if you lay down flat.
When it got too hot, I would just go out to the atrium with the linoleum floor and sit there, lie down on the floor where it's cooler, and start making sweat angels in an attempt to dump heat. Well, everyone who's made a snow angel can pretty much figure this out. It's the same process, except you're leaving a puddle as opposed to an imprint.
Sooner or later, we developed a infestation of mice.
Sometimes it seemed like they were everywhere.
We had flypaper set up. I don't know if that was to catch mice or not.
Finally, we actually caught a mouse, which kind of scared us a lot because the mouse was still alive. Only he had this one foot that was caught in the tape, and so he's kind of trying to get away, but he's dragging this big piece, this 8.5 by 11 piece of sticky paper that's got a bunch of roaches stuck to it as well. So we all looked at each other. In fact, I think Robert Ellis was the one who said, "Well, we can't kill this mouse." And I'm going, "Well, that's what most people do with mice." He said, No, we got to liberate the mouse. We have to free the mouse." I'm going, "Robert, we've been trying to catch this mouse." "No, we have to free the mouse, free the mouse." So we decided
we would take the trap and march it with the mouse on it, and march it 3 blocks south, and carefully unstick the mouse while singing "Born Free," and the mouse would sort of stickily scuttle off into the underbrush, and we would go back to work.
It dawned on me that this company was definitely unusual when we were in the last week or two of the show.
And of course, it's a Christmas show, so you can't ship it late. There's no shippy lady on a Christmas show, because no one, for Groundhog's Day, people do not buy Christmas videos. So we had to get it done on time. We ended up, working around the clock.
The reason there was this night shift was because the computers, we only had 3 or 4 computers that we could actually work on.
They just wouldn't leave the office. They just had to get the show finished.
I have a very distinct memory of stepping over a sleeping animator in a hallway to get to the edit room, so we could try to finish the show. So there were just people lying on, pieces of foam rubber on the floor, trying to sleep while we were getting it done.
We called it the Noni foam, remember?
That's right.
My mom's name is Noni, or Nona, Noni for short, and she had all these old foam things that she, used to use under her mattress or whatever, and I, inherited them somehow, and brought them to work, and,
yes,
everybody laid on the Noni foam.
It was a harrowing time. I remember just people laid out on the floor the very last day, including Phil. We're all just like crashing.
I was still working full-time at a church as a director of music. So I would work my full day at my other job, come home, and at that point my studio was in a spare room in our house. It didn't even have a door. It was just kind of off of our dining room. So I had it half filled with music equipment. So 10 o'clock at night, or whenever Phil was done with his work at the office, he would come over. So we had a lot of very late nights into the morning trying to get the score done. And then he'd have to get a few hours sleep and go back and go to his regular office.
At this one point, there was an announcement made, and I've been there for 28 hours now, and this announcement comes over our phone intercom. The final shot will be rendered in an hour. And I look at my clock and it's like midnight and I'm thinking an hour, gee, that's going to be 1 a.m. So I get on the train and the stop before downtown goes right by our offices. And so I'm looking at the window, I look outside and I notice as we go by the offices, every one of the employees' cars are still there. Look at my watch, it's 9:15.
We had gotten so close to the time we had to have this thing delivered that we had to put Bridget, our administrator, secretary, sort of catch-all person. We were going to have to put her on a flight and fly her down to Dallas, Texas, so she could deliver it by hand. FedEx wasn't fast enough.
The tape left. Bridget headed to the airport. She caught her flight. She got down to Dallas, handed the tape to the duplicator. It went off, and they started making copies of The Toy That Saved Christmas. Meanwhile, the rest of us just kind of collapsed. Everybody went home. But that night, about midnight, Phil Vischer, Bob the Tomato, wakes up with these terrible chest pains. He thinks he's having a heart attack. Lisa Vischer, his wife, Junior Asparagus, takes him to the emergency hospital. It takes him about 3 hours to figure out, well, no, it's not a heart attack, but actually a bacteria, because he's so depleted, his body is attacking his heart. And they send him home and put him in bed. He has to stay in bed for about a month. And then, now that he's rested up, we're thrilled he's alive. We know that's just terrific. But as soon as you get well, could you write the next script?
The Toy That Saved Christmas was a watershed film for us because we had never attempted anything limbid before. You know, we just had vegetables.
In The Toy That Saved Christmas, the penguins, which I didn't appreciate at the time as a real dramatic production improvement, but they had arms and legs. I mean, they had wings and legs, featherless wings, albeit.
So the animators really started getting into, okay, give us some arms and legs, you know, anything with arms and legs, which led to, okay, you want it? Here it comes. It's Buzzsaw Louie, a jointed toy, and then ultimately, you know, the penguins.
Tom Danon at one point had the scene where Louie first steps out of the warehouse and slips and tumbles down the stairs into the snowball. And he was just laboring over this, you know, how does this have to look and everything? And he finally, he saw a Jackie Chan movie, and he saw one point where Jackie's just like flying through the air, but his arms are windmilling and his legs are kicking, and it was just this, the perfect action fall. So that's where Tom got this inspiration to give Louie the Jackie Chan fall. So that's what it became from then on. This is Jackie Chan.
I didn't realize how difficult that was because of our software that we were using. I mean, actually animating appendages really slows down the process. It's why we use vegetables.
And it was actually on this show, The Toy That Saved Christmas, that one of our vegetables, for the first time, acted with his shoulders.
That's right.
And
That's
vegetables don't have shoulders, but Mr. Nezer shrugs. You know, as Ron Smith was the animator.
It's just the scene where the townspeople confront Nezer, and he's kind of, you know, oh, I don't know, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're doing. And I just put this little chuckle thing in there, and because he was more costumed than most of the other characters. He had his little shirt and tie and his pants, but just because I had that to kind of make visible the edges of his relatively spherical shape going up and down, it was this groundbreaking moment of vegetable thespianism.
And I just remember watching that. It's like, what? Play that again. How did you make him shrug? He doesn't have shoulders.
Quite some acclaim I gained with that one.
So it was on this show that, you know, the animators really started pushing the animation to a level beyond what I had conceived.
When Nezer has them all tied up on the sled at the end before he sends them to their doom, the ability of the computer to animate, like do secondary animation, if you move this character, having the rope move with him was impossible. We couldn't do that. So if you watch the show and you're like, that rope's not really around them that tight, they can get out of there. Just please remember that we were having to finagle that rope after moving every character. It's, good thing they're tied down and they can't move too much, but even then it was still pretty big chore.
Big Idea Productions presents the VeggieTales Christmas Spectacular!
We were excited that we were finally going to get one of our shows on TV. So we did a deal with PAX that had just started. It's like, well, this will be fun. Let's see if we can, a new network, see if we can get a new audience to come to a new network to watch Veggies on Christmas.
Larry?
Yeah, Bob?
This is network television.
I know.
Do you know how hard it was to get a network to turn over an hour of airtime to a bunch of vegetables?
Well, I love Christmas music, so when we had a chance to do a Christmas show, I thought that was going to be a lot of fun, which it was. But we didn't use a lot of traditional Christmas music, so I had a lot of fun trying to sneak it in where I could. For example, on the silly song, "Oh Santa, da 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 da," at the end there, through the whole verse, you hear jingle bells underneath there. At the very end of that song, you hear just a line of Joy to the World. Bum, bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 bum.
With a lot of the silly songs, it's kind of a conglomeration of a few different experiences for me.
Oh, Santa, I can't wait for you to come. I just can't wait for you to come, and I've got cookies.
I think Oh Santa, obviously I wanted it to, have a Christmas theme. I had just seen, my wife and I went and saw the play The Kiss of the Spider Woman with Cheetah Rivera. And so we had just seen that, and there was a song in that kind of caught my attention. And it wasn't really the melody of the song, it was more of the style of the song. There were two singers kind of in a duet, and then their lines would overlap, and they wouldn't be the same lines. So, they'd be, kind of singing over each other like that in a really kind of a cool fashion. So I thought, oh, that'd be really neat to do something like that.
We could do that too.
We could do that.
We
yeah.
could sing at the same time too.
Yes. We thought that, and then, so I came up with this concept of, Larry, having these cookies ready for Santa, and then, different people would come and take his cookies besides Santa.
In the score, it's fun to sneak in some Christmas songs here and there also, but some of them aren't as familiar. For example, there's this one. See if you know this one. Which is, Willie, take your little drum, da-da-dum-bum-bum. But I like to sneak that in where there's some real action sequences. Bum, 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 bum. So I change up the rhythm and kind of hide it in there.
The messages are almost as much for parents as they are for kids. Like, hey, let's just look at how stupid this is. That we're all running around, gotta have it, gotta have it, gotta have it, and it's stuff that no one needs at all. So that was the genesis of Buzzsaw Louie. The little, like, what if an action figure, like a Cabbage Patch Kid, stood up and said, hey, this is ridiculous, this isn't what Christmas is about. You don't need me. I'm just a little stuffed sock, and that's the storyline.
The toy that saved Christmas was another step in the chain. Every show we make leads to discoveries that enable us to make the next show, make every show that much better, that much bigger, that much grander. The stuff we learned in Toy That Saved Christmas went on to be used in Larry Boy versus the Fib from Outer Space and Josh and the Big Wall, and they in turn taught us things to make the stuff that came after them.
I think Big Idea Productions is the only company that makes children's programming that handles faith issues in such a relevant, real way, with great humor and enjoyment. So it's a joy to work with. But originally it was like everybody just kind of had their fingers crossed. They prayed in the morning, Lord, we sure hope we don't lose anything today because we don't have time to back it up, nor do we have the funds to pay for backup.
We knew we needed a theme song, and I had some time on my hands, and so I thought, hey, I'll start writing a theme song. I started off with, if you like to talk to tomatoes, if a squash can make you smile. And I got stuck on a rhyme with smile, and eventually came up with produce aisle, which when I came up with it, I was really excited because I was super frustrated. I couldn't find anything that fit with smile. And I thought Larry could be playing the tuba along with it because that'd be the easiest instrument for him to play since he didn't have any hands.
I actually borrowed a tuba from an old band directing friend of mine. I used to be a band director, so got a tuba from him, played it live. I threw a couple mistakes in there because we realized Larry's not the best of tuba players, so I could have fixed some of those mistakes, but wanted to keep the realism in there. Now in the theme song, we keep saying that Larry's playing the tuba. That's not really correct, because a tuba looks something like this, except much bigger. What Larry's actually playing is a sousaphone. Here's a picture of a sousaphone. See how it wraps around the body? John Philip Sousa actually invented this so that the tuba players in his marching band could march along with his band and carry their instruments with them.
Dance of the Cucumber, I actually started to write that in a car.
Miren al pepino.
Watch the cucumber.
Que suave es
Oh, how
movimientos.
smooth his motion.
Es como
Like
mantequilla
butter
en un chango pelón.
bald monkey.
I was dating my future wife at the time, who is Colombian and a native Spanish speaker, and she had this tape called Los Americanos, and it was actually a guy singing all in Spanish about the Americans, you know, and it was a parody song about, you know, just sort of making fun of Americans in a nice way, and my wife would translate that for me.
Miren el tomate.
Look at the tomato.
No es triste.
Isn't it sad?
Pero no puede bailar.
He can't dance.
Pobre tomate.
Poor tomato.
I just thought that was a really fun dynamic. Here she is. Here's a song being sung in Spanish, you know, making fun of Americans, which was me, and she was translating it, you know, to me, you know. So I thought that was just a really great dynamic, and so I wanted to, you know, thought, okay, that'd be a perfect thing for Bob and Larry to do.
No comprendo.
No comprendo. I'll show you no comprendo.
I wrote kind of how I wanted to structure the jokes in English, and then asked Lisa, okay, can you help me with Spanish words that rhyme? And so she worked with me in laying it all out, so it actually worked in Spanish and rhymed in Spanish, but the concept, you know, remained, you know, what it was from the beginning. So it was a real fun process just to work through that with her. I wanted it to sound authentic, and so I didn't want to sing it with the obvious gringo accent that I had, and so my friend Manuel came in. He sang the whole song through once we had finished writing it. And so I made a tape of that and put it in my car and would just listen to it. I listened to it for a couple weeks and would sing along with him to try to get the accent down as best as I could. And so then when I went in to record it, you know, it sounded like, you know, I knew what I was doing.
You know that in love we can forgive. It is the only way to live.
About this time, people in Chicago started hearing, you know, about there are these guys up on the north side making videos, you know, and so they started sending us voice tapes. And one of them was a guy named Jeff Morrow, who turns out was the voice of Diggum from the old Sugar Smacks commercials, which is pretty cool, and had done, you know, Folgers in your cup, and just had this huge voice. It's like, oh, I love this voice. And so we cast him as Palmy, the palm tree, you know, with the little coconuts that sing backup, which are both my wife. My wife is both of the coconuts. And Jeff was the palm tree. And it was just so cool, you know, because Mike and I could never ever do a voice that big and rich. And it was our first, you know, one of our first attempts to bring in a real voice person, not just two Bible college dropouts who thought they could do voices.
And now it's time for Silly Songs with Laddie, the part of the show where Laddie comes out and sings a silly song. So without further ado, Silly Songs with Laddie.
The Water Buffalo song was the very first silly song and the only one that I wrote. And I was walking through the plaza of the Dirksen Federal Building in downtown Chicago, and I had a handful of tax forms. All of a sudden, into my head, this little song just jumps. And I start singing, everybody's got a water buffalo, yours is fast and mine is slow. And I thought, well, where did that come from, first of all? And that's kind of fun. That could be, you know, the first little goofy song that we put in as this break.
This is the only silly song I had absolutely nothing to do with. Phil came up with that little ditty. He sequenced it at home with his one or two little modules and his little drum machine, and brought a friend in, Mike Sage, played guitar on it, and that was that.
When we were working on Water Buffalo, just singing through the first verse of the second verse, everybody got a water buffalo, woo! That was supposed to be originally that was just supposed to be a real short note, but when we were in the booth recording it, I just thought it'd be fun. I think Three Amigos is one of my favorite movies. I just love. It's just a really, you know, goofy movie, when the guys sang the Three Amigos theme song, they hold out that note forever, you know, and I wanted to do something like that similar in the Water Buffalo song, so I just, you know, held that note out all the way to the second verse, and you know, it took a few takes to get it down, just because you get so out of breath when you hold it that long. So I had to make sure I had a huge, enormous breath right before I started to go all the way through.
But everybody's got a water buffalo.
I start writing the first VeggieTales episode, and I think, okay, I think there should be a song here. Got out my guitar and just strummed these, 3 simple chords and sang. Called my wife in, said, "Come here, Lisa," and she's a music major, so it was a little embarrassing. Said, "God is bigger than the boogeyman. He's bigger than Godzilla or the monsters on TV. Oh," and just sang that little song for her, and she just stared at me. Said, "That can't be a song." And we were going to a church where they had a great music director whose name was Kurt Heineke. And I was watching him one Sunday, up on stage, and he had his synthesizers and sequencers all out and was doing all this great stuff. And I thought, I'm gonna go talk to that guy and see if he could make my little song sound like a big song. And sure enough, he was interested. He wanted to help out. So we started writing these little songs, and then Kurt would try to actually turn them into real songs.
If my lips ever left my mouth, packed a bag and headed south, that'd be too bad. I'd be so sad.
I Love My Lips. I actually wrote the majority of that song on jury duty. It was a song that I came up with the hook of it on a drive from Minneapolis to Chicago. I'd been visiting my brothers in Minneapolis. Started basically singing the basic, parts of the song. I wanted to actually yodel as Larry, so it started off as "I Love My Tongue." There was another, so where, now where he scats, he was actually yodeling.
Phil had a great concept there, taking all the different elements, the guy singing, "Oh, no, what we gonna do," and have that drum part in there, kind of like sing, 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 that big band sort of feel. It was fun to work with that. It was a challenge back then because, again, we had no live instruments. We didn't have a budget for that sort of thing, so I had to create everything in my sequences and my samplers and my keyboards, and to try to get that live feel. But the song is great. I mean, to take those different lines you'd call it counterpoint in music history, where you take one line and it comes in and sings one part. Now you add another part that sings a completely different part, and then a third part, but they all blend together miraculously. And that's just great writing, and Phil did all of that.
My wife and I had just seen Joseph, in the Technicolor Dreamcoat by Andrew Lloyd Webber. So I thought, okay, I can do that. I'm gonna write a musical based on a Bible story, just like Andrew Lloyd Webber. I'd never done anything even remotely close to that. And I woke up in the middle of the night with this little melody going through my head, bump, 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 oh no, what we gonna do? So I got out my mini cassette recorder and I ran into the bathroom and shut the door.
In the middle of the night, I woke up because he wasn't there, which does not happen. And I am thinking, where is he? And I look and I see a light coming from under the bathroom door. And I'm thinking, is he sick? What's going on? I better go check. And I went over, and as I got closer, I see this shadow as if he's sitting next to the door, which made me worried. Perhaps he was ill. And then I hear this song. I hear him going, "I am King Darius. I've had a dream."
I was actually in the shower one day, and I usually shave in the shower, and the razor that I used wasn't there, and so I was looking around for it, and I just started singing, "Oh, where is my razor? Oh, where is my razor? Oh, where is my razor?" And it just sort of clicked. It's like, oh, well, that's kind of fun. And so then I developed that into this whole little, mini opera about looking for, my razor. Why do you need a razor? You don't have any hair. And I don't have a whole lot of facial hair. So that's where that sprang from. And so I just sort of built this whole song about Larry looking for his razor so he can shave. And then went to Phil and said, "Hey, here it is."
And I said, "Problem. I have a problem with that as a mother." And he said, I guess I didn't think about it. He was in the shower that morning, and it came to him. He couldn't find his razor. He shaves in the shower. What's that all about? But he's, "Oh, where's my razor?" And he said, "Oh yeah, that's not gonna work. It's really bad." I said, "Mike, we just cannot be sending children all over this country looking for their parents' razors." So he said, "Hairbrush. Oh, where's my hairbrush?" We said, "Great, go run with it, write the song," and he did. And can't remember when we came back in to record it. And we had all seen the words and thought this was going to be just hilarious. We loved it. And we all came in. I think I was the first one to come in and record. And Junior has the line, you know, why do you need a hairbrush? You don't have any hair. And Bob has those lines of, that hairbrush of yours, you know. And I'm in the booth recording it spoken because that's how Mike had envisioned it. He was envisioned the only sung part of this whole thing to be aware, and then it would just be all spoken. And the funny thing is that Kurt had already laid down the piano track, that fun piano, almost kind of Lady on the Railroad kind of sound. And he had laid it down, and so we had to fit our lines in between whatever space he had given us in terms of that arrangement. And so I went in there to record my line, why do you need your hair, but you don't have any hair? And I'm hearing this and this music, and I'm in the music, and I just sang it. I said, why do you need a hairbrush? You don't have any hair! And they like were laughing and crying, and I said, I'm sorry, I know I was supposed to. And they said, no, that's great. Maybe we should sing all these lines.
The bunny, whoa, I ate the bunny.
The great thing about the Bunny song is it's a really catchy song. The bad thing about it, which is probably the catchiest song in the whole video, and it was the song that you weren't supposed to sing. And so, you know, parents, we got some letters from parents afterwards saying, you know, love the video, but, you know, my child is, you know, singing the Bunny song. I won't go to church and I won't go to school. I don't want my child singing that. And so when we did when we made the video, the sing-along video, and in subsequent records, we actually, you know, changed it to the new and improved Bunny song, which is, you know, using the same catchy tune with words that you would like your children to be singing.
We are the pirates who don't do anything. We just stay home and lie around.
I toured with the Continental Singers after my first year in college. At the end of the summer, in the fall, we were going to be in Boston, you know, in the Boston area. And, you know, and I just started singing a song about never being to Boston in the fall, and how, you know, I've never done this and I've never done that, and I've never been to Boston in the fall. And actually a few of us in the group actually, you know, started to sing about this. And it was just fun, but it was a melody that had stuck in my mind, you know, over the years, because this was, you know, a number of years previous to this, probably 10 years before the point where I actually wrote the pirate song.
We had spoofed Gilligan's Island. We had spoofed Star Trek. And I had this idea for, you know, what other fun genres could we go after of spoofing Batman. And my initial idea was that it would be Bob, and Bob would be Bat Bob. And I had a vision of a teaser scene to kind of tell people, you know, this is what it's going to be like, of Bat Bob, you know, standing on the edge of a building, looking down at night, you know, very dramatically with this huge cape billowing behind him. You know, he'd strike a pose and say, I'm Bat Bob. And then all of a sudden the wind would pick up and his cape string would break and his cape would go flying off into the night behind him, and he'd go chasing it across the roof and look down and say, a little help? You just kind of set up, this is what this is going to be like. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, you know, he needs Robin, so Larry could be Robin, effectively. So maybe it would be, and the first thing that popped into my head was Bat Bob and Larry Boy.
Well, Larry Boy first appeared in Dave and the Giant Pickle, and that was sort of a costume that Larry donned because he wasn't feeling special as himself, and so he put on this costume of Larry Boy and got stuck to the wall in the countertop scene. And, you know, Bob, you know, brought him down and, you know, told him the story of Dave and the Giant Pickle, you know, which basically taught him that little guys can do big things too, and that he should feel special about just being himself. But it was okay to dress up like superheroes.
And so he puts on, you know, a spandex costume with toilet plungers on the side, and I have no idea. I mean, I remember sketching out the costume. I think Chris Olsen came up with the color scheme and actually built it, you know, but I did this little sketch and just thought he needs to have something that makes it look like it's homemade, and he's put it together himself, and it's kind of ludicrous. You know, and out of somewhere came toilet plungers on his head.
Wherever there is trouble, I'll be there. Whatever a helpless vegetable calls out, I will answer. Evildoers beware. You are no match for the awesome power of Larry Boy and his super suction ears.
And people loved it. They loved the idea, you know, of him and his toilet plungers, and there was just so much possibility there that we thought, okay, we need to do a whole Larry Boy adventure. And hence came the development of Larry Boy, and the Fib from Outer Space, kind of a classic, sci-fi 50s feel. Something big comes from outer space, falls to the earth, and he has to fight it and combat it.
From my standpoint, what I remember most, just beside voice work, and it hurting more to do Larry Boy, because there's just a lot of screaming, Alfred! And I just remember my voice hurting a lot coming out of those sessions. We did 1 million takes, and because we're just starting, to develop the character.
I've been driving around all day. I'm tired. I'm hungry. I've got to go to the bathroom. This suit is very constricting.
Larry is a little higher and a little squeakier, and then Larry Boy just gets a little gruffer. That's all, a little rougher around the edges.
The monster is headed toward the Bumbleberg water tower. He is carrying a small asparagus. Alfred, we must find a way to stop this beast.
And I also remember the amount of sound effects, because back then I was doing all the editing and sound effects, and with all the machinery of all the toys and the Larry Mobile and all the things that the Fib crunched and broke. I mean, there was much more sound effects work in that show than there had ever been in any previous VeggieTales.
Joseph Pulich, when he came in to apply for a job as a designer, and I wanted to know, can you draw funny?
I'm like, well, what does funny mean? How do you draw funny? Yeah, I could draw a funny character, but no, it wasn't the character. Can you draw funny?
So I said, okay, here's a test. You go home. I'm coming up with this character named Larry Boy. He's got toilet plungers on his ears. Here's what he looks like. And he needs a car, like the Batmobile. You go home and design a car for this superhero, and if I like it, you're hired.
So I was just trying to figure out what could be funny, and then I just figured, well, wouldn't it be funny if Larry, who designed the car, designed it to look just like himself? So just started drawing different things to make it look like Larry. Before I knew it, was really just Larry laying down with wheels on him, and then we just added some extra details to it to make it look kind of cool.
And so he came in a couple days later, and he had designed the Larry Mobile, toilet plungers for wheels, the whole thing. And I thought, okay, I like him, he draws funny.
Most of what I did was the environments, the backgrounds that you see, and the background paintings. And it was the first time in Veggie history that we really put a lot of emphasis on the background paintings. Instead of building everything in the computer that you would see, we build a part of the set that actually needs to be built. There's no other way around it. But areas in the background we can actually paint, and we could actually make it look a little more organic looking, a little more fun and free-flowing than if we actually had to build everything out with 3D geometry. Most of that city scene that you see there is all modeled in 3D geometry. But as the buildings go back in the background, instead of having multiple buildings, there's just a flat piece of geometry with a bunch of painted buildings on it. And then all the sky that you would see are about 3 different paintings of clouds, different multi-layers, so that as the cloud is moving, that's one painting on one layer, and then the cloud in the background moving in a different direction is on another layer, and another layer, and another layer. And by doing it that way and stair-stepping it that way, we can add a lot of depth and vibrancy in the color that we couldn't really get otherwise. And we could do it at a much faster pace.
With Larry Boy, it's not nearly as light as the stuff we had done before, because I was really trying to parody not just Batman, but specifically Tim Burton's Batman. The dramatic Michael Keaton, I'm Batman, that thing. Duh! The Gothic score, the Danny Elfman score. So it was a very specific parody, not just Batman. It's Danny Elfman, Tim Burton's Batman that we're doing here, and the score in particular. Kurt and I worked really, really hard. Kurt, just about killed himself on that score because we wanted to really bring it up a notch. We wanted a men's choir. Oh, we wanted it gothic. We wanted, shake your seat kind of stuff, and that was a ton of fun. And I came up with a few of the basic themes. Da 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 da, Larry Boy. Some of that stuff. Dum bum ba bum bum ba bum bum ba bum.
Larry Boy was the first real step into big score. Let's get it as big as we can make it, even though we don't really have a budget to do that. So we got 12 guys, a dozen of them got together. We met one night at the Moody Bible Institute in one of their classrooms and recorded. We were so early in the process that I hadn't written most of the score yet. So I actually wrote out 3 or 4, 5 pages of just little phrases. Larry, 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 Larry boy, you know, or the Larry boy, those sorts of things. Just writing snippets, dozens of them. Then I had this library of phrases, had them all written down on my paper. There's number 1 through 36. And then would just, as I'm writing, and say, okay, I think, oh, here's a dramatic point. I think it's time for the choir to come in. Okay, here's a phrase. Okay, right in that key up to that point. Drop the choir in, write the orchestra around them, and keep on moving. So that's why you really never hear any long choir phrases in that, because they're just, I almost treated it as one instrument in the orchestra.
I had picked up a kids album done by David Mullen that had just, it wasn't your typical kids album. It had some incredible songs on it. Just, you know, shake the house, crank it up, you know, move your fanny. I mean, really fun stuff. And I was initially thinking, man, just want to take a couple of these songs and try to use them in a VeggieTales video. But then as we got into Larry Boy, I thought, okay, you know, maybe I can actually work with him to do a song just for Larry Boy, you know, do a theme song. And so, you know, I met with him, gave him that assignment. It's kind of Batman, but, you know, a little twisted, but real big and real fun and kind of big bandy. And he came back, you know, in relatively short order with this, you know, kind of chord groove that he wanted to do. Larry Boy, waka, waka, waka. And then his wife, you know, Nicole Mullen, actually recorded it and just, you know, blew me away. Like, this is the coolest thing. I can't believe we get to put this in our video, and nobody else can.
I think it's a really cool concept just to have a superhero who has all of the, you know, right things, you know, has all the equipment, has all the you know, has the costume and has all the right toys, but, you know, really isn't, you know, all that super. He's a nice guy, but not all that super.
We decided that Josh and the Big Wall, which is the story of Joshua and the Battle of Jericho, that would be a great story to have on stage. Great story, one of our most popular videos. The spectacle of the walls of Jericho falling down. Of course, the fun peas in the story, if you're familiar with it. The walls of Jericho falling down are a little bit more complicated on stage than they are in a video. You can do, you know, all kinds of fun things in animation. So it was a challenge to bring that segment to life on stage. To have 2 separate walls that had, you know, rocks that fell off of it, smoke, all kinds of really cool effects, pieces of the wall that fall backwards, you know, styrofoam rocks. Who could we get to bring these characters to life? Michael Curry, probably one of the foremost costume designers in the U.S., did the opening and closing ceremonies for the 2002 Winter Games in Salt Lake, won a Tony for Lion King on Broadway.
Not only is he capable to do most anything out there, but I think that he has a real resonance with our vision, and there was little to no problems as far as communicating with him and him being able to get this and being able to project the big idea vision and the VeggieTales vision.
You know, the scale of the characters themselves was a challenge.
They all have to be proportional to one another as they are in our videos. Bob has to be at least 5 feet tall because we have to put a person inside of him. Therefore, as we did the math, we realized that Goliath was going to be 14 feet tall, and that's a kind of a crazy thing.
Come on, Dave! Look at that!
The costumes are cutting edge. They're inflatables. The actor or actress actually climbs into the costume when it's deflated.
Yeah, we had some deflation issues. These characters carry around a couple of battery packs on them and an actual motor inside that keeps them inflated. And at the beginning of the show, we were having some problems with the characters staying inflated. So
just the first run through.
Yeah, just the first run through. But Larry would come around the wall and his head would be, you know, sagging in and, you know, bending over and
then the next time he came back around the wall, his mouth was taped shut so the air would quit leaking out.
Right. So we went through a couple of run-throughs with a lot of characters with their mouths taped shut, and it would keep the air in. And yeah, that was kind of funny.
The actor inside the costume can actually move the character's eyes back and forth and all around. The eyes themselves are rare earth magnets, and then the mouth is a like a palette that basically goes up and down, and they're shaped as the character's mouth. Many of the costumes actually have cameras that are in the nose of the character, and then they have a screen inside the costume that they actually can see. Most of that's for looking forward. Our director, Michael Bernard, did a great job on working with the character choreography, and it is much more challenging than choreography with humans. And we have moving set pieces. You know, we call them characters. In essence, they're moving set pieces because of their size. For example, Larry is 9 feet tall and 3 feet across. We have times on stage when there's 7 VeggieTale characters that are on stage together, and so how do those characters all move around together without, creating a vegetable soup? We introduced a live human character into the story. We felt that was necessary to have a live person, in this case a stage manager, be a part of the show itself. One of the deep, dark secrets of the live show is that we've occasionally had characters lose eyes. Sometimes we've had characters that have brushed against each other and they have brushed the other character's eyes off. And so it's great to have a live person on stage. She's become very cognizant of this. She's had to reach down and put the character's eyes back on. The VeggieTales Live is very different than other kids' shows in that it does have a message. It's not just about entertainment. Joshua is one of our most popular videos. It's a really important story element of the live show because it has such a great message. I guess for us, the live show is a great opportunity to provide a new experience for our fans in a whole new venue, and also for an opportunity for them to be able to enjoy this great experience together. So it's not just mom and dad with the kids watching it in front of a TV, but it's mom and dad and kids and thousands of other ones together in this great new experience.
I remember way back, I think in year 1, Mike started kicking around an idea. He had just read Madame Bovary, the book by Flaubert, which I guess is a rather depressing book, which ends with a suicide. And for some reason, he decided that would make a great kids show.
It was a very tragic story, and reading the story, it's like frustration at the main characters. Like, if you saw it this way, your life would be different. So basically that was the approach that I took to it. I thought, okay, well, if this character, could be thankful for what she had and, for the things around her and, for what God had given her, then it could be a happy ending. And of course, the story itself, it's got a lot of literary value. I mean, it was really saying something about, the middle class of 19th century France, but, I just sort of threw all that away and said, hey, we could have fun with it with vegetables.
His basic concept for the whole show was it was a blueberry, and she was really sad. She wasn't satisfied with the things she had, which is similar to the book. And so she sings, I'm so blue hoo hoo, blue hoo hoo, blue hoo hoo hoo. And so he was running around the office doing that.
I sat down at just a piano and plunked out the tune I'm So Blue. And I remember singing it for Phil and Lisa. That's all I had in my head at the time.
And so I kind of encouraged him, hey, we're gonna need another show after, this one that we're working on right now. So why don't you see if you can get that written?
And I had it, on my brain for years and years. And it wasn't until, show number 10 that I actually sat down and wrote it. I had been writing silly songs, the whole time, but I'd never written a full screenplay, which is a pretty daunting task the first time you sit down and try to write, a screenplay.
And so he had written this script, but he wasn't exactly clear on what exactly he was teaching, and so there were a few places in the script where he had written, where it was a clear teaching moment. Teaching moment where it said, and Dad, Dad says, fill in later. It's just a little, I don't know what he says, but it's beautiful and it teaches something.
Because a thankful heart is a happy heart.
I'm glad for what I have. That's an easy way to start.
And then he handed me the script and said, can you do something with the holes where some teaching needs to go? So then I went through it, and I really liked the basic concept, of this woman who had everything she needed, but was satisfied with nothing.
And I actually used The Grinch That Stole Christmas as sort of a framework for the story. Just how, in terms of how the whole story progressed and the change of heart, and then the action climax at the end. So the Grinch sort of helped me out a little bit in terms of story format.
And he wanted to play up the big box retailer angle, as if she could go to this promised land, this giant discount store, then she could be happy. She'd find everything she ever wanted there.
When we were trying to design the look for the Stuff Barn, we had different variations of what that could look like. And then Mike Naraki and Mike actually came up with the idea, let's go to Sam's Club. and we went there, and we were walking around, and I'm sketching, because we couldn't take cameras in anywhere. So I'm sketching away. I'm like, look at that, look at this, look at this. And I'm just sketching everything he's pointing at. And we came to this tuna, and it was this 5-pound can of tuna, this huge tuna. And as I'm sketching it, we had a few people that were shopping with their carts just kind of stop and just kind of stare at us while, you know, and they're looking at the tuna like it's really special tuna that I'm sketching. You know, they actually brought an artist out to sketch that tuna. But it was just a great deal of fun, sketching what the aisles would look like, and actually looking at the lighting. I never noticed lighting in a Sam's Club before, or any supermarket before. But we're studying what tile would look like, and just having loads of fun with that. And as we're doing this, they're looking up on the ceiling too. What's he looking at? When we were designing the treehouse, we wanted to have a lot of fun with what her house could look like, and yet we wanted to have tension. So we're thinking, well, what could we do to have this visual tension? Well, we could put her on a cliff, we could put her on stilts, we could put her on all sorts of things, or on the side of a hill. But then you start to think, oh, a tree house, and as the house gets more filled up with all this junk that she really doesn't need, the tree starts to shake and it starts to move, and you can have a lot of fun with it, and then you could actually bring it down all the way and then shoot it up into the air. So that visual tension and those visuals were used to help tell the story and help get people on the edge of their seats.
Whoa, that was a close one.
When you just look at the face of commercialism and say, you can buy anything in the world except peace. You know, and to try to wrap that into this, again, it's like a little parable. And it came out perfectly as this, wonderfully, and it's still many people, it's their favorite show. Because of this balance between this classic storybook feel with the tree houses and, you know, just the design of it all, and the music. And then, you know, Mike's kind of wacky contemporaryism, you know, his commentary on consumerism and big box retailers and the rap spoof and all that. And it came together in such a way that, you know, I think it works just tremendously well.
Well, there's a very famous painting by Edward Hopper, which is actually in the Art Institute in Chicago, and it's been parodied many times. You know, either by Bugs Bunny or I think there's an Elvis or James Dean version of it. But it's basically, you know, 3 people in a diner in a New York City diner called Nighthawks. And it's just, you know, the painting itself, you know, you can imagine a story around that painting, and, you know, I just wanted to throw vegetables in there and see what kind of story you could get. After we did the cheeseburger song in Madame Blueberry, a radio station from Duluth, Minnesota actually sent us a petition signed by, you know, a bunch of their listeners. Basically, it's a Bring Back Our Silly Songs petition, because they felt, you know, bad for themselves and bad for Larry that, you know, Archibald had, you know, kicked him out of doing silly songs. And so it was sort of, you know, just very tongue-in-cheek, but it was this, you know, an actual petition, and it came in, it probably had, you know, 300 signatures on it. And it came time for us to, you know, do another silly song compilation, or another, you know, sing-along compilation. And, you know, I just thought that was really cool and wanted to incorporate that in somehow.
We, the undersigned, believe that Archibald Asparagus should forgive and forget the Song of the Cebu incident and return Silly Songs with Larry to regular veggie programming, signed 167,512 adoring fans, including, but not limited to, the entire population of Duluth, Minnesota, and even someone in Moose Lake.
This is a song about a boy. A song about a little boy and his taboos. A song about a little boy and his 3 taboos.
That song I wrote in Colombia. I had gone to Colombia with my wife to visit, and you know, I saw these animals walking around, and they just cracked me up. You know, they were Cebu was the name of these animals, and I think the English equivalent would be Brahma bull. And they were, you know, they were just everywhere, and they were kind of sad looking and looked a little malnourished, and but they just had a lot of character to them. And this one town that we were in, we were going out for ice cream with some friends of hers, and we were driving to the ice cream store, and there was 2 Cebu just walking up the street, you know. And so I imagined a story where they had just gone for ice cream and now they were walking back home. And so I decided at that point I was going to write a song about Cebus.
Mike had a real specific idea for the general rhythm of that song. It needed something contemporary with all these percussive elements and some of the synthesized sounds, but it also had to have this sort of ethnic folk sound to it.
We didn't have a lot of fun in the desert. We didn't have a lot of fun in the sand. Well, saddle up your cow and go behind us now, because we're going to the promised land.
The fun element that I could bring into that was a lot of wacky instruments. Got to use the kazoo. I've got two different ones here. Going to the promised land. Got to use kazoos and the slide whistle here. So anytime you can use instruments like that in a song, you know, it's got to be a good song.
Good morning, George. How are you? I hope you're feeling fine. I'd love to stay and talk, but it's almost 8 o'clock and I haven't got the time.
Laura the Carrot, such a cute voice. Kristen Blagan just has captured a nice quality there. She was one of the actresses that we used to work with at church when Mike and Phil and myself were all at the same church down in Chicago. People like Kristen and Dane Anderson, Dan Asparagus, Mike Sage, one of the Scallions, all were in the drama and the music teams, and so we would hear their voices each week on stage. Phil would hear something in that voice. Say, okay, I think Laura the Carrot, she'd fit well with that.
I thank God for this day, for the sun in the sky, for my mom and my dad, for my piece of apple pie.
Phil wrote the Thankfulness song. With Madame Blueberry, that's the first VeggieTales episode that I wrote. When we were trying to develop a theme, originally it was about contentment. And so what does contentment mean to a child? And, you know, and that means thankfulness. You know, a thankful heart is a happy heart. And, you know, and Phil did a great job, you know, incorporating that into a little song.
The Thankfulness song has such an endearing, simple message to it, and such a easily memorable melody that we actually ended up using it sort of as our theme at the beginning of our shows. Why we do what we do. You hear just that first little line, da da dum da da dum, which seems so perfect for what we do.
You go ahead and keep walking.
Keep Walking was fun just because of the amount of P's in that. And Phil and I did all of the P voices, and there was probably, you know, 25 P's singing that, and we just tracked that thing to death. And it was so hard to come up with a different P voice with a French accent, you know. So we just went through. So what other kind of French accent can I come up with? You know, I think I've only got 2 in me, but we just, you know, sang for 25 P's and then added them all together, and it sounded like an entire P chorus.
You silly little pecan. You silly little peas. You think that walking around will bring this city to its knees?
Well, they're French, so how do you capture French? Well, the accordions, of course. A French cafe, you imagine the accordions playing in the cafe. So I wanted to capture a little bit of that, and that's both in the sound of the accordions, but the style, the 3/4 rhythm in the middle as they're talking and taunting them. So I wanted to create that Broadway feel, this typical Broadway song, but at the same time we had to bring in that French element for the P's.
You're not going to sing, are you?
You're big, I'm little. My head only comes to your middle.
We got a little more budget. I was able to actually use my live trumpet playing some. We've got this big band drums going boom, ba boom, ba doo, ba doom, ba da, as they're going back and forth. So we tried to bring that into that song also.
With his help, little guys can do big things too.
The seed for the Stuff Mart rap actually came from a trip to one of those giant warehouse stores. I don't know if it was Sam's Club or Costco or whatever, but it was the 5-pound can of tuna. I remember the first time I saw a 5-pound can of tuna. I just couldn't believe it. And the whole Stuffed Mart wrap was built around a 5-pound can of tuna. Some of the stuff that was just very memorable to me going into one of these stores for the first time was the tuna, the air compressors. There's always a big line of air compressors, and then just other stuff like scuba gear. You find anything in there. So I wanted to make sure it was stuff that you'd see and you'd kind of notice in one of those places, and then the goofy things that you would do with them. You buy an air compressor to blow fruit flies off your dresser, which is really hard to say, and even more difficult to sing.
He said to her, I'd like a cheeseburger, and I might like a milkshake as well.
His cheeseburger started off with the concept behind what would happen if Larry fell in love with the girl at the drive-through window. And so it started off as Drive-Through Girl was the name of it. And after I got into it a little bit, into the lyrics, I just thought, this isn't Larry's song. It sounds kind of weird, for him to be singing this song. And so Mr. Lunt, who I always really liked as a character, I thought, this seems more like a Mr. Lunt song. But then as Mr. Lunt started singing about the drive-through girl, that just sounded kind of weird to me also, and so I changed it to Cheeseburger. But then it's the very first silly song that Larry wasn't in, just coming up with this whole story about how Larry got, removed from the silly songs. It's a song that I'd love to finish. At the very beginning, Larry is there in a bear trap, And actually, the original version, we actually had a couple of verses in there of Larry singing some kind of song with the bear trap. I've forgotten what it is by now, but just for timing, reasons, we cut it out at the end.
Mike came up with this concept of a story taking place in the Swiss Alps with a veterinarian. You've seen it all the time.
That was inspired by the Chad Mitchell Trio for me, which is a comedy folk trio. It was an album that my dad had, and I used to listen to a lot as a kid. But I just thought it'd be really funny to tell this story about, this veterinarian who yodels, who really doesn't do any good, and it's his nurse that actually, prescribes the correct remedies. I just thought the combination of the quartet was really funny, which was Frankencelery and Scallions number 1, 2, and 3. Phil did the voice for Frankencelery and Scallion number 1, and then it was me and Mike Sage for the other Scallions.
It was a challenge because you can't even record a quartet like that as you might typically record a group, because, well, first of all, 2 of the voices are sung by Phil, and then so he can't sing those together. And then you bring in Mike and Mike Sage on the other characters' voices. They all get pitch shifted because they're character voices, so you have to record it a little bit slower and a little bit lower. So you get each individual part recorded, coaching them on what parts to sing, and you start blending those together and creating a cohesive blend that sounds like a group would be singing it together.
A couple of months after the show came out, I got a clipping in from a fan. It was a newspaper story out of some newspaper in Wyoming, I think is where it was. It was about a veterinarian who yodeled. And I just, that was hilarious. There's nothing new under the sun. As wacky as you can think up things, real life is even wackier.